Liz Gamache, joined by Senator Carolyn Branagan today, and we're pleased to invite you to join us in a conversation with Senate candidate Pam McCarthy. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. Thanks. We are glad to be here with you, glad that you're watching, and we hope that you will learn more about our Senate candidate and that we will answer some of your questions.
And welcome, Pam.
Hello, Liz and Carolyn. Thanks very much for giving me this opportunity today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So are we. I'm really excited about your candidacy. Pam, I've known you for a long time as a friend and as a colleague. And I think what you bring to Franklin County is so important, and there's a lot to your story. Your character, your ability to listen, to understand, and solve problems is so impressive. And you've got a track record that shows that you are a problem solver, and that your interests are the interests of those of us in Franklin County and Alburgh. So we're really looking forward to having you have the opportunity to introduce to our viewers the platform, and we'll ask a few questions and get to know you a little better.
Sounds good.
Great. Carolyn, what excites you about Pam's candidacy?
Well, you know, I'm no newcomer to the scene in Montpelier. I served down there for 18 years. It was really interesting. I loved my work in Montpelier, and I'm sad to leave it, but I'm glad that we have someone as competent and skilled in many ways as Pam McCarthy to run for one of the Senate seats this time. Working in Montpelier is not fun and games. It's not just go down there and have fun. The work is very important. The decisions we make there have impact on the Vermont constituency for a lifetime. And we are chosen to represent them and to serve them. And I know that Pam understands that. She's, no offense to anyone around the table, but she's old enough to have lived life and know what is important: family, friends, jobs, being able to earn a living, a good educational system. So I'm really pleased that Pam has agreed to take up this torch, and look forward to her success.
Well, being a first-time candidate is no easy feat. So Pam, what was it that prompted you to make this move to run for an elected office?
Well, I have to say that throughout my lifetime, I've always looked at where am I best placed to make a difference. And when I saw the results of the last election and I heard the things that people were concerned about, having worked in this community for well over 25 years in a variety of roles, I really felt called to step up to the plate. And I've been so encouraged by what you've done in your career, Carolyn, and you, Liz, in yours and your leadership. It's been a great inspiration. And I think that I have something to offer at this point in time that's going to be valuable. And to your point, Carolyn, I think the gravity of service in Montpelier is not lost on me for certain. Again, there are many things I have yet to learn, but I am very well energized and plan to be able to come having listened to the voices of our constituents and being well able to represent them when I'm elected.
What are you learning on the campaign trail?
Oh my gosh, I'm learning so much about our community. I see it through a very different lens. I've had opportunities to serve here in various roles, including being a small business owner and working in nonprofit and working in state government. And when you go to people's doors and you ask them what they think, and they're able to tell you about the challenges that they have and the things that they value and what's going on with their families, and they allow you that look into their lives and trust you with that information and hope that you will be able to do something constructive with it should you be elected. It's really, truly an honor. I think we had the opportunity this weekend to do some canvassing in Bakersfield, Kelly Cummings and I, the House candidate there. Mm-hmm. And we spoke to a young couple who are self-employed as as farmers. They have a little baby, and they were talking about the things that really matter to them right now. They want to be sure that, they're able to have health care that they can afford. They want to make sure that their little one has a great early ed experience that moves into higher education that eventually leads to a future for this little person that is going to be employable and hopefully keep him here in the state. They talked a lot about needing to have connectivity for self-service and for the internet to be able to promote the products that they're growing on their farm. Again, to just have that perspective and think about, so what can we do in the legislature to address those concerns? How can we make these things happen and do it in a timely and economically viable fashion for the state?
And speaking of economic viability, one of the things that I frequently heard was the tax burden, how it's weighing down people in Franklin County. One of the things I focused on, as you all know, is trying to keep a lid on taxes and a lid on fees. I'm glad I was able to do that, but it's still a concern of many people out there. Property tax, income tax.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to those things?
Certainly. That is not lost to me, and I think it is expensive to live here, and I think basic needs like housing and transportation and healthcare all are burdensome on taxpayers. I think we need to increase our tax base. We need to attract new people here to the state who are going to live here and contribute to their communities and to the tax base. I think we also need to take a look at the things that we're doing. I'm reminded of my friend Martha Maxim, who directed the United Way of Vermont in Chittenden County, now including Franklin Grand Isle, and is now at the Agency of Human Services as the Deputy Agency of Human Services Director. Talked a lot about you need to think about stop, start, less, more. You need to analyze what it is that you're doing. You need to look at what it is you're investing in and the results that you're achieving. And you need to make some hard choices sometimes about things you're not going to do anymore in order to do new things that are going to have a better outcome for the people that you're serving. Having served in state government before, I know that there are some hard choices, but there are some opportunities there as well in terms of bringing things together more holistically and thinking about what it is we're investing in as a state. So I think there are a variety of ways to look at this, not the least of which is financing education in new and different ways. I think there were some great ideas brought forward at the end of the last session that hopefully will get to be pursued in a different way this next time around. The burden on the property tax is not sustainable. That's very clear. And I think we need to see what the impact of Act 46 is going to be in the state and whether school consolidation really results in economies of scale and better opportunities for all students in our communities. Thanks.
Yeah, and as a mayor, a former mayor of St. Albans, certainly hear those comments as well about the importance of spending our tax dollars wisely.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I know about you is as the lead person of a major organization, you have significant budget oversight responsibility,
Yes.
and you operate your budgets responsibly.
They are lean and mean. As the head of Vermont Family Network, which is a statewide family support and advocacy organization for families of kids with disabilities and special health needs, our budget currently is about $2.2 million. A lot of this is grants that are level funded year after year and other resources that we bring in. But you see costs increasing, particularly around compensation and benefits for staff, needs that are identified by families in our community that we can't necessarily stretch to meet. So here again, we need to make some well-informed choices about things that we can and can't do, and we need to consider new resources and pursuit of those new resources in ways that are sustainable, and we're actually trying to do that within my organization currently. And I think there is some transferability of that thinking to what might be happening in state government, given my experience at AHS in the past.
And to add to that experience, you've also been a small business owner, and you've managed your family's household budget over the years.
Absolutely.
So you've felt it from many different angles.
Absolutely. I know the challenges of having 4 children and now 5 grandchildren, elders in the families who have health challenges, the price of education for all 4 of those children for whom we're still paying on loans. All of those things are very challenging, and it's meant that my husband and I have worked full time, and he has continued to into his 70s, although he's now saying he's retired, we'll see. That said, I do know the challenges of just day-to-day expenses and managing things, and also the investment in your children's future, which we were fortunate enough to make, but we will be paying for a long time into the future, as will our children. I think, too, that when I look at what it is to manage a small business's budget, and again, needing to take care of employees, needing to sustain good local product to make our baked goods from when we had Cosmic Bakery and Cafe, it was expensive and ended up being very much a labor of love. And I know there are many other small business owners out there now who are facing the same thing, and we need to think about what it is that we're doing to be able to keep employees and really make sure that businesses are sustained in our economy and that we're growing businesses as much as we can. So there are a lot of things that we need to consider from a community standpoint and a state standpoint as we look at those things.
Mm-hmm. Pam, I'm so glad that you understand all those things well. And one issue that came up to us in the legislature toward the end of the session, but that didn't really play out at the time, was the prison, that perhaps the prison might be added on to, that more people might be assigned to Northwest, and looking at the broad number of concerns that come with that. Families following their person who's incarcerated and perhaps adding on to the school's population, rental units, would there be enough for the families coming up, and a whole number of things, as well as the need for more trained people to work at the prison to meet the needs of those folks who are incarcerated. I know I'm really throwing this at you with no background, but have you had thoughts about that?
I have had thoughts about it. And when the original plan came up last year, as somebody who had worked in the Agency of Human Services pretty much cradle to kaput with corrections in the mix, looking at ways that we were trying to reduce the prison population and to ensure that there was not so much recidivism and that people were returning to community as contributing citizens, I was really concerned at the idea of a campus where we would have youth, and we would have mental health population, and we would have people who were serving their sentences, and all of these things combined, when it seems the real issue is there are construction needs at this facility. There are also prisoners that we have out of state, and that's not a great thing in and of itself, because oftentimes those people bring back things that they didn't go away with, which are not positive to community and to their families. And I just think we need to rethink this. The other thing that really was disturbing to me about that whole plan was it was kind of sprung upon Vermont and Franklin County, mind you. We never had the opportunity to really entertain conversation about it before it became public. One of the things that's really important to me is to be transparent with people and to talk about ideas in a way that engages folks at the front end, not to spring things on them later and then have them throw up their hands and say, I can't really talk to you or work with you because I don't trust that you're going to tell me the truth or that you're going to work with me effectively. So understanding that project is not dead, according to Dan Connor, who had spoken with me about this a few weeks ago, I think it's going to be important that this community remain aware and also be able to have a voice in what the next steps are around this. And if I'm your senator, I will be very much in the mix with that, because again, having had the experience with both trying to prevent people from going into the system, seeing them while they were there, and then bringing them back to community again as contributing citizens and family members, I have a stake in this as much as anybody.
Carolyn, one of the things I've admired about your tenure as senator is your ability to communicate with your constituents. I've really appreciated the frequency and the regularity that you have taken the time to put out communications that explain what's going on in Montpelier. It helps to keep us informed. Pam, it sounds like communications is important for you. Can you share with us a bit how you'll be communicating with constituents? You talk about transparency being important.
It's critically important to me. And Carolyn set a high bar, particularly with her written communications and social media, which I myself have appreciated. You and I have talked about how this isn't about party. The information itself and the generosity and articulateness with which you provided it has been extraordinary. I would like to be able to follow in your footsteps, although, as I said, you leave big shoes around that. I think it's really important, again, to engage people at the front end, to have forums where you can hear from people, to do the legislative breakfast, to entertain the conversations on the street, in the grocery store, if someone calls you or emails you at all hours, that those things are really important. And I think if you talk to anybody who's worked with me or who knows me well, I'm probably hyper responsive. I used to be known as the Energizer Bunny when I worked in the Parent-Child Center and also in the Agency of Human Services, because I really want to make sure that people have their needs met, and part of that is about listening and responding. And again, that is my intention, to be able to do that should I be elected.
I've always felt that this job isn't one that's given to you by the Republicans or given to you by the Democrats. This job that you're running for right now, the state Senate, is a job that's given to you by the voters, by the people who go into the voting booth and check your name. And even those who don't show up to vote are still your constituency.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to reach out, to get where they know your face. I went in this afternoon to Sticks and Stuff, and the guys in there recognized me. I don't know their names, but they knew that I was Carolyn. And it just makes me feel so good. People do read those letters, and it's really important. And Pam, I have to say, I think that your understanding of that and that ability that you're going to bring to communicate well in the job comes from your maturity and your experience in life, and I so much appreciate your willingness to step forward and take this on.
Thank you. I appreciate your confidence in me, Carolyn. I really do.
You know, people get involved in politics for different reasons. For many of us, it's about service to community, and that intention to serve community first and foremost is really, for me, what's motivating and exciting about the work that you've done, Carolyn, and that Pam will do in the Senate. Putting community first.
Yeah, that's true.
What it's about.
I learned that from my parents, my community, serving your town and the people around you first. Where did you learn that, Pam?
I learned it from my family as well, and I think because we were in the Air Force and we moved around a lot, we had to develop community every couple of years, basically, and it became so critically important to have those relationships, to learn who people were and how you fit in, to really build that, not only for yourself and your family, but for other folks to get to know you and contribute something. So I feel like my folks had already set an example around that when I was much younger, and certainly where we landed for the years that I was in high school and college, that was really important to me as well.
Great.
Good.
Franklin County, Alburg, covers a lot of territory.
Absolutely.
You've talked about some of the people that you've been meeting on the campaign trail. You've talked about the importance of small businesses, and we have small businesses in Franklin County that are in our downtowns, whether it's St. Albans, Enosburg, Swanton, and so on, our village centers.
Yep.
And then we've got the small businesses in our rural areas. Thoughts on how to support the different needs of the more urban areas versus the rural areas?
Well, I think we have to pay close attention again to what those different businesses are asking for. I do think that for many people, whether it's in a more urban setting as it is for Vermont
style
or
urban.
in very rurally isolated areas, again, connectivity is really important to people, particularly if they have products to sell. So, we're thinking about that. I had a great conversation at the Cooperative Creamery a couple weeks ago where the folks there were really talking about, are there ways that we could create more opportunities to produce and sell more product beyond the borders of Franklin County and Vermont, essentially, and how might we best do that, and how could production be expanded here and with the Vermont brand really go very, very far. And they were saying what really is necessary is that we have that connectivity and are looking forward to opportunities to be able to promote that. I think it's also critically important that we're developing a workforce that is going to meet the needs that employers are seeing, not only now, but for the future. Things are changing so rapidly. Yes. And I think, we have a lot of different things that are happening here in Vermont. Some are much more technology oriented, and some are going back to just working the land and being able to produce those types of products and a variety of things in between, including many things that are arts related. We have such a rich milieu here, and when I think about what I love about the state, it is that diversity creativity and the ability to think of new things and new ways to connect them to people. So I'm really hopeful that I would be able to take back what I'd heard and actually work with other people within the legislature to make those things happen for folks.
Two of the things that we hear a lot about affecting both families and businesses come to mind. One is childcare.
Absolutely.
Would love to hear your thoughts on how we can provide more access to affordable, quality childcare.
Well, it's interesting you should ask. Carolyn and I just had an opportunity the other night to speak to some providers in Fairfax. Yeah,
right.
Fairfax. And we really were struck by the concerns of some of those providers about how at the time the state is really trying to enhance quality and capacity, some of the things that providers are being asked to do are so extraordinary and so requiring of their time and their money that it's becoming almost impossible for people to make their businesses stay viable. So, we need to rethink how it is we're regulating our child care system so that it is of quality, but that it's providing choices to families and to employers, and that it is ultimately expanding those choices for people who want to have their children in care. I'm also very interested in what the impact of a paid family leave would look like, and whether people were able to stay home with their infants should they choose to, and still be able to have some income while they did that, whether that might reduce some of the pressure on the system. I don't know that for a fact, but again, we have not gotten there yet, and we didn't pass that legislation last session. That said, there's a huge amount of resource being poured into really rethinking the child care system. I've been involved in the Building Bright Futures think tank work that's in response to the Blue Ribbon Commission that was really trying to address this issue. There's private funders like the Permanent Fund through Let's Grow Kids and VB5 that's trying to look at how do we again increase quality, expand the number of providers, and professionalize the field. It right now has some things that are major challenges, I think, particularly for the providers who are currently serving children. And we need to be thinking about the added expense for infants and toddlers and how it is we accommodate that when families want to have their youngest children in settings where they know that they're safe and they're well cared for. So I have a lot of concerns about that. I also have years of experience in early care, health, and education, and I think we need to focus on child development. When we think about what it is that young children need, from their home to their childcare to their early learning setting outside of childcare, how do we set the stage for that? Where are parents engaged around that? What are the resources that families and communities bring to the table to make that a success? We've been having some conversations in this Building Bright Futures think tank about full service and community school concepts. How does that intersect with the existing child care and education system? How do we think more broadly about what families want and need, what the education system's purpose and role is in this, and what are all the supports and services that have their own roles and intersections with this to really make it a great experience for young kids, prepare them for school success and life success. So I'm very invested in that happening. I think our employers are as well. I certainly know that stakeholders like parents and grandparents like myself are. So I bring a lot of passion to this work, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to advance it in the next few years.
Great. I can hear that in your voice, and I'm really pleased. The Ed Fund is the biggest fund now in state government, and we need to make sure that all that money is used responsibly.
Absolutely.
If you are elected as state senator, the responsibilities go beyond just the things that you have experience in. I know when I first started, the difficult things for me were road building. You go to any select board meeting, and they talk to you about their trucks and their graders and roads and salt and all that. And then also came along about 5 years into my term, water quality and cleaning the water, phosphorus runoff, and the dangers that exist in Lake Carmi. That was a nightmare.
Absolutely.
I think we've got a handle on making that better, but time will tell. Do you have a strategy, Pam, to jump into those areas that you perhaps are not as familiar with, and how will you go about learning about those and responding to the constituency?
I'm an eager learner. Again, I have done a number of things in my life, many of which were new to me when I first was thrown into them. And I tend to be great at connecting with people who are content experts and seeking them out. So I get that opportunity. I also am good at finding research and source materials so that I can look at evidence-based information about what we should do about certain things, getting experience from other colleagues in other states who, again, have more expertise in certain areas than I may. You mentioned infrastructure issues. That's certainly not an area where I'm well qualified. I certainly am interested in water quality and stewardship of the land. I had a biology degree in my undergraduate studies. So again, those things are near and dear to my heart. And I think that where I know I don't know what I don't know, I will definitely seek people out and seek out information. And in this day and age, there's more than anybody could ever take in at any point in time. So I think looking for credible sources that know Vermont and what Vermont and Franklin County need are places where I will start.
Pam, we've covered a lot of territory, and there's still so much more that we could cover. Briefly, one very important topic that we haven't touched on is the opioid crisis and how that impacts families, individuals, families, communities, businesses. Thoughts on that and how you'll be engaged in helping to solve the issues we face?
This is one of the most pressing issues of our time, in my opinion. When I was working in field services, I did a lot of work with Fred Holmes and Bob Wolford and Neil Smith in the community. That was the time when the Bess O'Brien film was made around the opioid crisis. It also was the time when we started to see buprenorphine, Suboxone, being used basically to manage people's addictions. I think we've learned a lot in the meantime about the supports that people need in order to be successful in their recovery. I think we need to be looking at not criminalizing addiction, but treating addiction. And that requires that we have the types of treatment and resources for people at the point at which they are ready to pursue recovery that are of the duration and intensity and quality that they need in order to be successful. I was so excited to see Ed Hock's clinic the other night in A New Day in Swanton, and to look at his strategy around someone that has had these life experiences and has the medical expertise to really look at the intersection of a lived experience and neuroscience and medical expertise around how do you individualize each person's plan and work with them to give them their lives back and make them productive members of our society, even to the point that he's willing to vouch for people who are in his care with their employers, with their permission, to say this person's in recovery and you really should be supporting their progress. I think we've done a lot with hub and spoke in the state. I do think that we're still finding it difficult to effectively do prevention measures. I've talked in other forums about looking at what's causal to people wanting to pursue substances, and oftentimes, we know that people have become addicted to opioids through prescriptions that, again, may have been more than they needed at the time. How are there alternative ways for us to treat pain and to manage pain and still, when appropriate, utilize those drugs that are now misused oftentimes to treat it appropriately? And again, I think that's something that needs to be dealt with by the medical providers and the other folks that are supporting people in being able to address not only their pain and their management of it, but their recovery if they are people who have been opioid addicts.
Thanks. That's really, helpful to hear the breadth of thought that you're giving to this. We're going to run out of time shortly. This has gone by quickly. So as we're getting ready to wrap up, Pam, I would love for you to share with us the top three things that are important for us to know about your campaign. And think about this. We've talked a lot about challenges. Let's end hearing from you about why Vermont is such an important place to you and why you've made this decision to serve in the way that you have. And so give you a moment to think about that. Carolyn, final thoughts before we turn the last moments to Pam?
I know you have a lot of work ahead of you between now and Election Day. My advice is don't forget to sleep when you need to.
Thank you.
And eat when you need to. But good luck, Pam. I really wish you well in the campaign. I think you'll do a great job.
Thank you, Carolyn.
And I'd like to thank you for getting involved and for running for office. I know it's tough, and I know you're tough, and that you will serve us well. I hope our viewers today have had a chance to get to know you a little better and to see that you have integrity. You're somebody we can trust. You're smart. You know how to connect with people and put the pieces together. I think these are all really important. And for me, I'm really excited about what you bring to the table in terms of being inclusive and respecting different points of opinion. Today, I think it's so important to recognize that we're not going to agree on everything.
Absolutely.
But it's okay to agree to disagree sometimes, and you'll create the space for that to happen.
I appreciate that. It's very important to me. And to Carolyn's earlier point, this isn't about parties and partisanship. This is about serving the people of Vermont. That requires that we be really good, reflective listeners and that we work to collaborate with one another for the good of the state. And that's my intention.
Great. So, final thoughts, top 3 things, and why do you love Vermont? Why are you doing this?
Oh man, I love Vermont because it's the place I have felt most at home in my life, and I've traveled all over. I lived in Europe, I lived in Texas, I lived in Virginia, I lived in Delaware. I've lived by the ocean, but I live here now on Lake Champlain. I am rooted here. I have raised my children here. I'm seeing my grandchildren, at least one of them still, growing up here, and I want other people to experience the type of life that we've been able to have here. I'm very invested in ensuring that our working landscapes and our waterways are well preserved going into the future. I want an economy that works for everybody. I want to be thinking about how do we make that happen. We need to be ensuring that we have quality educational opportunities from the time people are very small until they are postgraduate. I need to make sure that we have workforce development that is meeting the needs of our employers and of the future, that the childcare that's necessary for those little guys while their parents are working in those fields is here in Vermont, and that we're thinking about the opportunities that lie ahead, because I think there are many, despite the challenges which Carolyn articulated pretty clearly earlier, and I agree with. I don't want to minimize that, but I really feel like we need to be thinking about what we can do and not be stopped by the barriers that are in front of us. And that too is going to require a lot of collective will and really thinking together about what's best for the state. And I intend to do that, should I be able to serve. Thanks.
Super. Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for
you're
joining the conversation today.
You're welcome.
And Pam, we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Folks can reach out to you if they have questions or they want to get to know you.
Absolutely. So you can go to my website, which is pamforsenate.com, or to my Facebook page, Pam McCarthy for Vermont State Senate.
Well, thanks again, and thanks to the viewers for listening in today. And good luck, Pam.
Thank you very much.
Good
Great.
luck, Pam. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
everything.
Pleasure.
Take care.